Yeah, so I was just wondering from our last conversation
Mm-hmm.
um, about like the linear and non-linear.
Mm-hmm. Tell me.
It brought up just a lot more of other questions around yeah, just how we think about like any idea of karma, like of our things like completing or at some point we're just going to like clear our karma and be clean of our karma. And I heard some other responses to the video too that like I think there's just like no one really knows actually. Like if there is any kind of linear way to address karma necessarily, sometimes it seems that life, like we said, just happens. And part of it is maybe these karmic situations or karmic attachments to certain things or um, dynamics in our lives that just activate us in a certain way. And I'm really wondering right now, like, if there's a time now to just question the linearity of undoing karma. And what if there's no like cleaning up of karma in that way necessarily? Or maybe there is, but maybe there's also another side to this karmic thing that's just life living. And I guess the second point to that is what is the benefit of living through really difficult karma? Because having gone through a lot the last like couple months,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just finding myself very grateful for where it's taken me, for all the difficulty, all the pain, and like honestly, all the suffering of just like feeling. I mean, you can define suffering different ways. We've talked about this, but just like the sheer heaviness of moving through a lot of grief and anger and sadness and all of these big emotions. I don't feel the resistance that I felt before, but I would still call it like a type of suffering. Um, and it feels that it's deepened me. I feel like I can love deeper. I feel like I can be with bigger things. And I just find such great value in going through these big karmic like situations. I don't know. And I just look at my life now and like think of the times when I've felt the most biggest, most terrible karmic situations and how it's led to greater compassion and greater wisdom, like practical wisdom, like actually having to live through things that um, I could maybe read a book about and claim to know something about it, but having had to live through the actual difficulty of it has given me an embodied sort of wisdom of just knowing what it's like to go through shit, like really hard shit. Um, and I feel really strangely grateful. I know it doesn't always end that way. I know I've got a lot of resources to be able to like time, space to be able to let things process. And so I feel very grateful for that. But yeah, I'm just kind of like putting out those questions around how we frame these ideas. And we've kind of already brought them up before, but I think it's particularly relevant to what we talked about last time.
Mm-hmm. Just a few little topics.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I never really thinking about much yet.
Just a few little topics to cover in about an hour. Yeah, sure. Um, I love it. I love it all, and uh, we're used to it by now that I'm already like seeing so many avenues we could like explore out of just what you said. So I'm just gonna bring up everything that came to mind as I listen to you, whether that's gonna be concise or make any sense. I have no idea. There's something that you said that I like feel in my whole heart, which is honestly, I have no fucking clue when it comes to karma. Like, this is my most genuine answer. And I know that that might surprise maybe some people, given that I deal with astrology, work with astrology, and so much of astrology kind of speaks to the so-called karma. Okay. So I'm not saying that whether karma exists or doesn't exist or how it works, whatever. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that one of the most amazing kind of byproducts of this awakening journey has been sort of realizing that I can't actually know any of this stuff. You know what I mean? There's like and that doesn't mean that I can't explore it. It doesn't mean, there's lots of things that fascinate me. So it really doesn't mean that like we can't play with ideas and, oh, maybe that's what it's about, or maybe that's what it's about. And a lot of things really resonate with me. Like when I hear people talk about karma, their takes on it, some of the things totally doesn't resonate with me, and some of the things resonates with me. But the most important thing is that anything that's in the realm of perspectives, interpretation, and meaning making on any subject is so arbitrary, as wondrous and beautiful and rich that it is, and I love it, okay, genuinely. It's not reliable when it comes to the truth, okay? So it's like multiple truths with little t, because to me there's only one capital truth, and that cannot be defined or spoken about or nailed, okay? So once that is like known, we can explore anything, but we know I hope it makes sense what I'm saying, Sarah, but it's like I'm not relying on any perspective. I don't have a need to believe in anything, if that makes sense. I don't have to believe if karma is true or not. I can just explore the thing. And if something resonates, that's wonderful. So that's like the premise of the whole thing, which is why when you said like, I don't actually know or something like that, that is like the most truest thing, that as a like a premise from which we're having sort of these conversations, that is about karma or any other specific topic. The other thing that came up for me, the cleaning karma, um, when it comes to ideas and interpretations and meaning making, this is the one that really doesn't. I actually feel a bit like it irritates me. I feel irritated by like cleaning karma. No, I'm kidding, but it's like what I'm trying to say, that I can see how this can become like, what about the journey without a goal?
Right.
So like, because it can become like a trap that I have to clean this karma. I have to sort out this whole ancestral stuff that came before, and I have to heal everything, and I have to whatever, so I can finally feel good or be awake, or awake fully, and to me that's just a massive trap. You know what I mean? And which involves a lot of me in it, that thinks it can even do that in the first place, or has any kind of control over like what was or is or will be, you know? So I don't know where I'm going with this, but this is one of the things that this idea just absolutely doesn't resonate with me at all. Um, I'm trying to look for some specific example. I can absolutely see patterns, like, for example, in my family, like, uh, related to neglect, or even relationship to food and body, for example. It's like I can see it with so many people in my family. And I don't even know whether if I heal this thing in me, this is gonna heal the next whoever comes after me or had any effect to what happened before. I think I want to make something really clear. I am absolutely not dismissing whatever is said or believed about how this stuff works. Okay, I'm not absolutely, I'm not dismissing, but I'm also not supporting any particular view, if that makes sense. I'm just saying that when it comes to this particular cleaning karma thing, I just think it's a trap, and I think that it can, it points to that separate self that thinks it can do that, and B, it creates a lot of really unnecessary fear, you know, and it takes you away from what's fresh and immediate and true right now,
which may be healing.
which may be in itself healing, right?
Yeah,
Like the
maybe the healing is happening in the moment, but if you're thinking I'm trying to heal or I'm trying to address my karma, it's taking
Mhm.
away from the actual healing and
Yeah,
maybe the undoing of a karmic pattern in that moment.
yeah.
Uh, which is so they're not exclusive of each other. Like in terms of if you release the idea or the concept of the trying to do it, doesn't mean that it won't be happening or it won't emerge naturally
Hmm.
your life,
Yeah,
which I think is
yeah.
what you're saying. Like you're not, and it could also be that you work at it, like and that it's not. But you're saying that there's like a way in which we can get in our heads.
Caught up, like so caught up in this and make it to be like this massive thing, you know, that
Mhm.
carries this massive importance. And then obviously with that, like I said, there's a weight and there's a lot of fear and stuff like that. So that's never helpful. Um, and the third point, and then you go wherever you want to go with it, is what if there is no benefit? You know? What if living itself as it is has absolutely no purpose other than the living itself has purpose inherent in it, however it looks, you know? And I completely get that, Sarah, because I used to uh, need things to mean something. I needed things to have some kind of meaning or purpose because it made me feel safe. So I completely understand the need for it. Completely. And I'm not even saying it's wrong to attach a meaning or it's wrong to have a purpose. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, what about if there isn't any? And can we be okay with that? You know, because that's like another search thing, to, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's these are like the few things that came up just out of what you said.
I
So
love how like yeah, we're like, yeah, we have some things to talk about, and then it just opens up these giant
yeah.
doors. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that like, we met because I asked you on my previous podcast called The Path is the Purpose that like I named for that same reason that I was like, I just feel like the purpose is like it just is like we are living it. We're kind of
Yeah.
leaning into it in every moment, but really coming to a place where that feels true um, is like getting so close to this moment that there isn't any distance where I need to sort of come in, like lean into something that
Mm-hmm.
means something that makes something out of it to make it feel meaningful,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling. And also, I think that brings up talking about like the spiritual and human dimensions of things, like
Mm-hmm.
it, I often have like referenced to me, it feels like the spiritual path is kind of going inwards. I use this like the infinity sign, like going, you kind of like go into the self and then opens out into this like limitless dimension of this unnameable, um, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you kind of come back in, you come into the human dimension,
Mm-hmm.
you also can find that limitlessness in every human thing, in everyday life. You can also go just so deeply into your human emotions and human things, and you come into that as the doorway we've talked about into this, into that which has no meaning or um,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's something about like the human body and the human mind and the physicality of it where we want to like express or like we want to
Totally.
embody and do something and be something in the world or because that's something that was surprising to me was like, oh, like this kind of feeling of there is no meaning, there's no purpose, and it's all fulfilled. It's all there. It all is. It's just complete.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also something very human that wants to create and then to be in relationship and to do things and
Mm-hmm.
that being like a natural expression of this.
Totally. Like it's not to me
And
that's not inseparable. Like it's not
yeah,
it
they're
is
the
this.
exactly.
Yeah.
And somehow we have to like talk about it as human and spiritual or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think maybe we can come to better ways to saying this over time, but it's just like being able to understand that those two things can be true. Like you can feel like there's not necessarily meaning and purpose that we need to create. And there's this thing that like where we feel like a purposefulness maybe, or even like a drive or a
Mm-hmm.
passion to create something or do something, be in relationships. Um, and that there's like motivation or like energy
Mm.
to be in the world and that in itself maybe some people call that karma like because karma literally means like action, it's moving, it's movement. So that's another way maybe to think about it is like maybe karma is just the natural arising in some
Yeah.
ways of this, right? If there's no separation between this and our humanness.
Totally. And to me that includes like the whole conditioned self that keeps on learning, learn something, changes, the changing patterns, the changing behaviors, the falling away of this, the coming in of that. It's like it's all part of to me, though, at least the way it feels, it's like just part of the same sort of play. It's just that we label it this or that or whatever. And I think, the trouble with the conversations about this, which I think we're hitting constantly, is that the language is dualistic, quote unquote, and it has trouble, and the mind generally has trouble dealing with paradoxes. Or two, like I said, the two things seemingly contradictory can coexist without distinction even and without any conflict. And so there is no talking about it without sounding like we're talking about two separate things in a way, you know what I mean? And it's kind of annoying.
Mhm.
But we're doing our best. I think that, yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no denying, and that fascinates me, and I love it, that there's this different expressions that Sarah is looks the way she looks, that she speaks the way she speaks, that she's interested in the things she's interested in, that she has tendency toward this way of expressing herself, and Maggie has completely different, or there are some similarity, or whatever. Like I just so love the fact that there are so many different expressions of this, and there's no denying of these tendencies and the differences and personalities and all sorts of things. But again, I think, I don't know, to me it's the, it goes back to what I was saying before, but I can't articulate it now the way I did before, which is like it's seeing this without the need to put it in a box, to call it this way or that way, to play with meanings and interpretations. Why not? If that's your thing and you enjoy doing it, then why not? But without that, treating it so seriously, like relying for it, like I said, for a perspective to be the truth about it, as if it's like certain that this is what it's about, like, I have no idea. So I think I'm kind of glad that I never actually got caught in this whole karma business. You know what I mean? Because I can see how at some point in my journey I would feel such a pressure, Sarah, just hearing certain people speak about it to clean my karma, for example. I would feel such a pressure, and I bet you I would feel fear that if I don't do this, something bad is going to happen, or I am not going to awake, or something like that. So to me, it's yeah, it's more about seeing anything that's said or thought about it for what it is, which is arbitrary, than like treating it so rigidly and thinking like, oh, that's the truth about this, because 'cause it goes back to like, I really just don't know. And I think that this was such a, it was only when I realized, Sarah, that when that isness sort of revealed itself, that I actually realized how rigidly I was holding on to certain ideas and about how things work, while also despising any kind of dogmatism. I actually found myself to be quite dogmatic, only in a very different form. You know what I mean? It was not institutionalized, it was not traditional, but I would still very much insist that what I think about a particular subject is definitely true, or like, but it was not conscious. So when I saw that, it's like it was just such a joy to be able to talk to people and like agree to disagree, and like sit with people who I disagree with and hear their perspectives, even though sometimes I hear them and I'm like, oh my God, and like I'm either annoyed or frustrated by it or something like that, and I totally don't agree, but without holding tightly to any of this, if that makes sense. That it's been massive for me. It's just been massive, in terms of interactions and letting people have different perspectives without needing to adopt one as the truth, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that includes karma. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I've definitely been feeling that too around what if we allow our differences actually, and instead of being antagonistic with differences, what if we
Mm,
allow that difference to expand our vision, like
mm,
because we all see things differently from different angles, from different ways of different conditionings and different insights. What if we open our vision or our eyes to see the way we see and the way someone else sees? So our vision covers more ground,
mhm,
And what if there's just more wisdom, more insight to gain? So what it kind of goes into that paradoxical place, right? Where like maybe it's not just my vision versus this vision. Maybe it's
mm,
actually that we get more of a 360
Yeah.
panoramic vision by including other people's way of seeing. It doesn't mean that I conduct my life the way someone's going to live their life. That's very different. But to include their perspective in the way that I see their world um, can bring, yeah, just a greater sense of being
Mm,
able to clearly maybe situations that I didn't understand before, and I think
mm,
what I've been learning, um, and a lot of that does apply to like how we create meaning,
mhm.
really. When we communicate through language, or we communicate through our bodies, through body language, we're we are we're transmitting meaning to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to understand someone else's meaning making can help me understand like why they might be hurt because this means that to them, or why I might be hurt because this means something to me, why that would offend you or why this would offend me. And it can be completely different frameworks for how we're creating meaning in this world. And that could be an exploration of great curiosity and just fascination,
Totally.
um, without taking offense. But that
Yeah.
is difficult when and there's wounds and there's triggers and there's things that are activated in the process. So if that's not possible in the moment, that's not possible. But when it is possible to just like you know, open that aperture of the lens a little bit in that moment, to instead of like closing down and it's just that narrow vision of just what I think, opening it up to just be like, maybe, just maybe, what this person has to say, the way that they're making meaning, the way that they're providing insight could bring something to my vision that will help not replace my own vision or my own authentic way of seeing things, but just provide like a cross reference almost to like what we're seeing together. Um, And I think maybe in the karma thing, the thing that came up for me in bringing this up was hearing, I've heard for a while teachers who have gone through the no self shifts talk about how their karma like slowed down over time, or that like it started to like release um in such a way where they're sort of creating a model for this like linear idea of karma, like karmic, um, patterns to kind of uh,
Right.
unwind over time. And that may be true to some extent. I don't know. This is where like, but I also, when I would hear that from teachers, there's part of me that would just feel like there's something in there that's trying to claim something, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
there's an individual trying to claim something about that they're cleaner than they were before. And I know that because my own experience with like when we find out things about our own like patterns and we could say like karmic entanglements or things like that. For me, it's always come when I didn't know. I didn't know, I didn't have the awareness of it previously. The awareness comes in, right? Like, and brings that thing to the surface. So it felt like, over time, what I've learned is like, I don't know until I know, right? Some things may be always there that I don't know about until I know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So how would I know that I have less than what I have before? Right?
Yeah, I just love the geeky vibe that just came through of just Sarah sitting and just like geeking this out. It's like, well, that logic it doesn't make sense. You know what I
Yeah, I'm just like wondering how the math plays
mean?
out. Because like if you're always unconscious, or the things are always
Mm-hmm.
subconscious or
Mm-hmm.
unconscious before
How
they
can you
become
know?
conscious, how
Yeah.
would you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless someone else or several people vetted you to see like, oh, you're like, because they know more other people in our
Mm,
lives can see
mm,
probably our unconscious things clearer than we can. But yeah, and I think about the times that I broke patterns. Like, for example, like I used to watch a lot of TV and I just couldn't break the habit. Like I just literally I tried so many times to quit watching
mm-hmm,
TV, but it was one of the things I went to for comfort when I was really suffering. And there's nothing wrong with watching TV. I just personally like didn't find it nourishing for me and I wanted to stop. But in my and I'm a pretty like, I've like been able to be determined to try to do things. But I couldn't stop watching TV until I had this massive breakdown in my life that we've talked about where like I had this big like moment where I hit rock bottom. And in that rock bottom and feeling all of the emotions that I felt and the massive release of just breaking open and everything sort of falling apart, the impulse to watch TV wasn't there anymore.
amazing.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I could have never controlled that, right? Like I didn't feel like I had control over that, over the ending of that pattern, of the ending of that way of coping. And I had no clue how like that ending of that pattern was going to arise. It arose in the most like strange and dramatic way in a sense. It's just TV, right? But I mean, it was addressing a lot of like helping me cope with so many emotions that I hadn't felt and I wasn't capable of feeling until I just broke open.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So that's an example of like
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
karmic pattern where like there was no way that I was in control of it. And it's almost like the negative or like the difficult karma coming through my life was what liberated that pattern.
Yep.
Not that that's always the case, but like I think that's where we can come up with some of these like counter examples to the way we think about
Mm.
uh, the linear model of karma too. But
You are absolutely killing my head, Sarah. It's like I'm just taking notes. Like, okay, we have to talk about the meeting, and we have to talk about this, and I have no idea where to go with this because there's just too much. Hold on. Let me try to like take it one by one. The first thing that came for me as I was listening to you, but again, I so appreciate what you said about the meaning when you went back to talking about the meaning because what I mentioned earlier is that kind of seeking for a deeper meaning in things that to me is kind of unfoundable ultimately. It's going to be another idea. Okay. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying don't do it, whatever. I'm just saying that is like a seeking in and of itself, seeking for some deeper meaning and realize that you can't actually know that, but your mind is going to produce all sorts of things about the deeper meaning. But then you talked about, and I'm just putting a name just for the sake of distinction, you talked about the personal meanings, what I would call personal meanings, right? What it personally means to me, as in this human, the way I experience things as a human, and why, when you said this, that meant this to me and triggered this wound, and this is why I got upset, or this is why whatever. To me, those are so beautiful, to be able um to talk about it and look at it without dismissing, because it actually provides the understanding, especially in the dynamics like between two people. I mean, are you kidding me? And we both had a situation, Sarah and I, where something triggered certain responses in ourselves, and we both just sat with it, and that allowed me, that sitting with it and allowing, quote unquote, for it to play out, to then say, to Sarah, this is what that triggered in me. You know, I didn't see it coming. Like, I genuinely didn't see it coming. It was just on the surface, it was something so completely like, oh my God, she just said like two sentences or one sentence. And that was like, whoa. I mean, boy, did that bring some stuff from that I haven't seen. And again, going back to the things that I was just not aware of, you know, before. So then I could communicate it to you. So you could understand why I had the kind of reaction that I had. So in that personal sense, I think this is absolutely wonderful. And it kind of ties up to what I wanted to say sort of at the very, very beginning. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just go for it because I want to really demonstrate the difference. So something came up this week for me. And boy, oh boy, it had to do with the fact that I felt really neglected as a child and left to my own devices. And I felt really lost. And see, this is like it still like comes up for me. And there's a particular pattern that I've been dealing with that ties into this stuff to do with the way I operated as a child. And the fact that I had real trouble just like I had incredible potential to like learn things and do things and achieve things, but I always struggled to figure out how to do it. And then have someone to like hold me accountable as a parent. And it's been a story of my life that I didn't know how to figure things out just to start. And that's all I needed. I just needed a little bit of help, but I didn't get it, you know? And there was such a sadness this week around this. And I just like saw it so fully for the first time. So here I am just telling the story of what that meant for me and the implications of that. And so one can call it the meaning making, right? And let me tell you, after First Awakening, I lost, like I said, compassion for this human experience. And the same situation would look very differently to what it looked this week. I would completely dismiss this whole thing. I would not sit with those emotions first and foremost. I would not let myself feel the sadness. I would tell myself this is just a story. And I would tell myself this is all made up in the mind. And I would tell myself that I should not be feeling this anymore because an awakened person with all those insights into the nature reality should not be feeling this anymore. Right? It would be a complete trashing of what was real for me in the moment, even if it was meaning made or even if it was an interpretation, right? So I actually said that and I thought I'm going to tell Sarah whether we're going to talk about it or not when I see you that I can't describe the beauty of just being able to sit there, this sadness come up that is actually free even of blame, even though I talk about this is actually really also interesting that I talk about my parents that I didn't get the kind of care that I needed, but without blame, which is kind of also difficult to convey what that feels like. Um, but honestly, even if there was blame, then that the blame would be allowed as well in that moment because that's what comes up, whatever comes up, the way it comes up, you see. So my point is that um, that sort of meaning making or a story when it comes up is beautiful because it's actually when a shift happened and I could literally feel that pattern that I'm speaking of loosening. I could quite literally feel that. So this is something that like I wanted to talk about that kind of difference between seeking meaning and like the personal meaning that comes up that actually can provide incredible insights and that actually helps a particular pattern to be released. just by virtue of meeting what arises fully in the moment, you know? And it's just been amazing. The other thing, do you want to say anything to that? So before I move
Yeah,
on to
I mean,
like another point?
I'll just say that yeah, it's so beautiful. I love the way that you bring in, like, I can just feel like the rawness of how beautiful that holding of that sadness was for you. And so I just want to like, yeah, just want to say that and that um it almost sounds like one way to say it is that like just meeting the meaning that is.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's not creating meaning that's not there, but
Mm-hmm.
there's this meaning, the hurt, the
Yeah.
sadness,
Yeah.
that it is meaning that has been already made. And
Yeah.
it is based on the way that we create meaning as human beings, that like our bodies need each other. We need human touch. We need companionship. We need connection. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way that we've created meaning as human beings. Like, um, and to just not, yeah, not add another layer of meaning, but
Mm.
see the meaning that is part of like kind of the human condition that
Yeah. Yeah.
arises is really beautiful. Like just to, it feels so like I was saying, raw and true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say was that what I kind of noticed, like what's helpful was much more helpful, just generally speaking. I'm not saying to everybody, is that anytime we hear a perspective, an interpretation, it's so easy because honestly, we're really when you look around, you could people talking about they share their perspectives, but they're speaking about them as though those were facts.
Yes.
you know and so and I but most of my life I didn't even realize that I was doing that myself. Okay, so this is completely like it's completely unconscious. So realizing that anything that comes out of the mouth is a perspective, is an interpretation, is not the same as downplaying it or disregarding or and that's not, it's just realizing the nature of it, which is that it's arbitrary and ever changing. And when that recognition happens, then it's so much easier to just, like I said, hold everything that's said just lightly. Okay, and then I think a question that is way more uh, um, productive, for the lack of a better word, um, is not whether what I hear is true, but does it resonate with me or is it helpful? Is it helpful? And I think that that's because whether it's true or not, we can't actually know when it comes to perspective on any subject, like really with certainty. So I think it's rather than like torture the mind to try to figure out if this is true, I think it's so much helpful and more productive to when hearing any perspective of on any subject is to be like, does it resonate with me? If it does, then let's explore maybe farther. Is it helpful? Does it free me from something hearing this? Does it open me up to something that I feel, that makes a difference? Wonderful. Then who cares if it's true or not? If it resonates with you, if it's helpful, then that's all that matters. So that's like that is in terms of like the meanings and interpretations. And finally, the other thing that you talked about was just I really had to like stop myself from laughing more because I wouldn't stop. It's just yeah, like you saying like the whole thing about being free of patterns and how can you possibly know that? Because let me tell you that just within last 2 months there's like I discover layers of a particular around a particular pattern or a particular wound. You know what I mean? So it's like it's so freaking cool. Like there's no, I have no, it's like I have no plan or desire to be free of any patterns in the first place. I have absolutely no idea how, like, um, like you said, so much of that is completely unconscious. So the way I look at karma, actually, I look at this is basically the stuff that's unconscious. And whether this is called karma or it's from past, so-called past lives or not, or however we want to call it, I don't know that. I'm just saying that just based on my experience, there's definitely unconscious patterns. There's definitely the stuff that I become aware of that comes up that allows me to understand those patterns. And then every single time, if I sit with what arises, including the grief or sadness, whatever emotions, that's how the pattern is being released. I have to feel it in the body. I can know something at the level of a thought about my pattern, but if it's not felt right in the body, then it's not gonna go, you know? So that, yeah, I'm gonna finish here because then I'm gonna start rambling and moving in some different directions. So yeah, so that feels like, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But to me, it were just the unconscious is what we're talking about here, I think.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, and this is where, yeah, anything we say, we're making some kind of meeting. But I
Yeah,
think what,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
what I think we talk about, our conversations are more like explorations than they
Yes.
are statements. And that's what I love about our conversations, is that I think what we're exploring right now is the sense of, like, because there's such a heaviness on putting weight on the linearity of, like, this is the progression of the spiritual path and this is how it looks.
Yeah.
It starts to peter out over time, and this is like and there's such a collective sense of that maybe we're just like, okay, and like, what if the unconscious is so much more vast than we could ever know?
Mm,
What if,
yeah.
yeah, this vast unknown that we also associate with, like, the infinite, the unknown, the void, is, and the unconscious is, what if that is just as vast? I think we think of,
Mm,
like, the unconscious human mind, or the unconscious of the human, as being limited in some way. Like, we can
mm-hmm,
somehow shine our light on our unconscious,
mm.
reveal everything in our unconscious, and complete our shadow work. And just perhaps
I don't even know what that means. Seriously,
whatever,
Sarah.
yeah,
I
whatever
don't know
that
what it means.
means. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that means. Yeah.
But I do think that is kind of an
I
underlying
completed module 1, 2, and
yeah.
3.
Yeah.
My shadow.
I
I
got my
take
shadow
shadow
work
number 1. Yeah.
certification.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and then it's kind of just like this maybe more Western way of thinking about, like, the
Mm-hmm.
linearity of our
Yeah.
psychology. Like,
Mm.
somehow there's a progression, we get out of things, and liberation is coming out of, like, a linear thing, progressing to a point where we're enlightened in this way that's like, everything's revealed. I am a perfect human being. I no longer have shadows. I have no ancestral wounds,
That's
or
a lovely story, though,
I
Sarah.
know it's a very it's a very alluring
It's a very
story.
lovely story.
Very sexy story.
Yes, very.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
there's of all the words to describe, the um this realization of the isness of life, or whatever you want to call it, is actually liberation. I really love that word, because but the way I see it is like there's definitely something that happens in that moment that frees something. Okay, that like I said, at least in my experience, primarily it's the resistance to whatever is experience goes. right? Um, but the liberating continues. Oh my God. Like
Yeah.
seriously, like I love the word actually. Like it's a verb. I'm a really big fan of verbs than nouns because like, I think you might have
Yes.
noticed that like awakening is a verb and like but the liberating continues and it's so incredible that it's fascinating how much this you only actually begin to realize the layers of like how the body keeps the score, to steal the sentence from I think Gabor Mate, I think maybe used this or maybe not, and I don't know who. I don't think it was Gabor Mate. I think it was someone else. I don't know. Either way, it's not my sentence. Uh, that the body keeps the score. I would say that it's fascinating to see that. And if anyone is into like things like myofascia release or fascia and stuff like that, that is I can't really speak to that because I've only recently started exploring this subject. But interestingly, for example, I have just a quick example. I have what's it called? Hip injury. And I've been doing a lot of stretching. I've been actually in touch with my physical body way more than I've ever been, to be honest. And I've been stretching this side of my leg where the injury is. And I was not in pain or even maybe mild discomfort. The emotion, I just cried so much when I started stretching it. And when I spoke to a guy who I'm going to actually see, so maybe we can talk about my experience of seeing a guy who deals with myofascia or
Yeah.
fascia release. Um, you know, when I told him that during like the initial consultations, he was completely not surprised. You know what I mean? He was completely not surprised because there's just layers to what this is why I see unconscious the same way as you do. Again, whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But it's fucking massive. It's like an ocean. It's like it's and it will be exposing things. And I think the most important thing that is to remember that again, if we don't expose ourselves to life and various situations, then if it's very possible that we'll never know. We actually will never know. And I think
Yeah.
that going back to Dawson, uh, and our previous conversation, I think that that was the case. Look what happened. He was in this little bubble for a really long time, surrounded by students who were looking up to him, not doing anything else other than what he loves, which is the teaching and stuff like that. Wonderful. And then look what happens as soon as he leaves the bubble and starts traveling and starts encountering different people and different situations. And look how incredibly teachable that experience been to him. But it's only when he exposed himself that this stuff came up, you know? So my point is that to assume that there's Sarah, I don't know. It's like you said, like how can you when you realize the vastness of this unconscious, and even just based on your journey, my journey, just seeing stuff coming up, and being revealed about certain things, how can you just based on this little thing, how can you possibly assume that there's ever an end to this or that you're empty somehow of these things or nothing else is gonna come up? Like, yeah. I don't even I honestly I genuinely don't know how this is even possible. Yeah. I can't work it out either, Sarah, but I was
Yeah.
never good at like mathy things and
Yeah. Well,
probabilities and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Um, well, just real quick, I looked up The Body Keeps the Score because I've seen that book too. I don't think I've read
Yeah.
it, but Bessel van der Kolk. So
Yeah,
for
there you go. Yeah, there's
folks who are
another
wanting
guy.
to find it, I guess probably, yeah, Gabor Mate and others have used that phrase though. But
It's a great
um,
it's a great phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, to your point around, yeah, well, and I just for folks who may feel like discouraged about the unconscious being like giant and like never ending,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be like a bad thing. I think that's part of maybe what we're bringing up too, is that um it's almost like the need to make it contained, to make it limited, to make it something we can conquer is something maybe coming out of a sense of
Mm.
fear. Like we
Of
fear,
course.
we have fear our unconscious because of what it brings up, because it brings up triggers, it brings up ancestral wounds, it brings up wounds from our childhood. These are not pleasant things to
No.
sit
Nope.
through. The deep grief and sadness from
Mm.
like intergenerational traumas, it's a lot, and then all of the collective traumas, like I think of if we bring up like some of these folks, yeah, that work in more the somatic world, like you know,
Mm-hmm.
I, the kind of work that I love hearing about is how, literally there's no such thing as an individual trauma, because in order to have an individual trauma, it has to be in relationship with somebody. Somebody
Mm.
has to have transferred some experience that created that sense in the body. And
Mm-hmm.
that would didn't just come out of nowhere too, right? That came from many generations of something happening. So we're all like these different, yeah, we're all these bodies kind of like interacting with each other, creating different things in our unconscious or maybe in our collective unconscious. They're like Jungian ideas of the collective unconscious and all that stuff too, which is fun. Again, we can hold that all lightly and not make definitive
Totally.
meaning
It's
out of it.
fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And what it brings up for me too is just having the experience of doing my dark retreat. I did this dark retreat where I was in complete darkness. The windows, the doors, everything was sealed so that there wasn't a sliver of light for 7 days. And
Wow.
in that process of literally just sitting there doing nothing for those 7 days, move some and um, but there was this sense of that depth of the darkness, right? Of like just being in literal darkness in a room that had no light. Gave me a sense of that infinity, of not just the infinity. It did feel the infinity that was opening behind every material thing that there is, or within, we could say, however we want to phrase it, this isnness, this unconditionality that's the limitless within the limited. But I could also feel, when we talk about shadow work or our darkness within us, I could feel like there was no difference between like the literal darkness of the dark night of the soul, and the
Mm-hmm.
darkness in that room,
Mm.
right? What we're most afraid of is
Yeah.
this darkness. Like, and I had a fear of the dark growing up. Like
Mm.
I would always have my parents leave the hall light on and my door open to my bedroom at night because I was afraid of the dark. And a lot of kids are, right? We're afraid of
Mm-hmm.
the creatures in the dark, the things that
Yeah, yeah.
might be under our bed.
Mm.
And same as adults, like even, where I live, it gets pretty dark at night. There isn't like street lights around the my little house. And I had a friend visit and they were terrified because there wasn't light. And it's a very safe spot, but just
Mm-hmm.
because there was no light, just because there was darkness, there was this great fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, isn't that interesting, right? There's some things that are just biological about that, about like, the fear of animals or even people who are dangerous and things like that, that makes perfect sense.
Mm.
I think there's a deeper psychological fear of the
Oh, big
darkness,
time. Yeah.
that it's interesting to just be in relationship to and realize some of the things that we create ideas that we create about darkness, about shadow work being finite, or the
Mm,
unconscious being finite, or things like that, perhaps it is
mm,
coming from this place of fear of the darkness.
yeah.
And
Which is
what's
understandable because it can,
totally,
yeah, the void when it comes up to swallow you is no
yeah.
fun. Let's admit it. At least initially, anyway.
Yeah.
No fun. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it totally makes I mean, yeah, there are all sorts of good reasons. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is interesting, like, what if we
All sorts of.
Yeah, like I don't
No,
know,
it's
like
true though. It's true though. Very good reasons. Very, very good.
yeah,
Beyond. Yeah.
very good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like I guess the question and the exploration is like, well, what if we befriended the dark? Like what if the darkness was just as generative and like a fertile place to grow?
Mm,
And that like our unconscious even like you the way you've been talking about it is like that like all these things come out of this darkness,
mm.
but they're generative. Like it's like creating like new things in life that are coming up to kind of be in a relationship with. And that can be um yeah, that can be just like included as a part of this ongoing life cycle, like things just kind of
Because
moving.
it, like even what we call the unconscious, it's this as well. Like it's not
Yeah,
separate. You know, it's
yeah.
not a separate thing, the conscious unconscious. It's like it appears that way. I mean, it appears that way, but it's actually it's this as well. It's not like a separate realm or like something like it just it's all this, you know? So and I think it's like what you were saying earlier that I think when whether it's the attempt to clean karma or break patterns or whatever, I think something really shifts when we go from, I need to clean this up, I need to get rid of this, I need to change this, this has to, to, can I meet this?
Hmm.
Like the difference is just massive. Otherwise, we're gonna be carrying inside some kind of end goal continuously, that we're seemingly trying to get to when, like I said, we covered all the modules and now we graduated, from like, you know, but and that's the biggest difference that, the way at least I see liberation is that when that resistance drops to any experience, however it looks in any moment, and whatever we label it, whatever we call it, however we interpret this, then it doesn't matter whether there is more. Then it doesn't matter if something else is gonna come up because everything's gonna be met
I love that.
regardless. So yeah.
I love that. I think that's the question we should end on this time too. Let's repeat it. So instead, what if instead of trying to clean,
Anything. What if instead of trying to get rid of, clean, heal, change to meet whatever is arising instead, and lean in. If it's discomfort, for example, then in a gently lean into it, you know?
yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. And what that does is it creates a different way of relating to the unknown, the
Mm,
dark, the unknown, the mystery, the infinite. It's like,
hmm.
well, all sorts of things can emerge from that, and I'll meet it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for bringing this up. And it actually tied to the stuff that's been coming up this week for me. So I'm happy that we somehow uh managed to weave that in. So thank you so much, everyone. If this conversation sparks any insights, questions, comments, then leave them below and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.